Hello, everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig Sports. This is the Core Pick video, Core Pick live stream for today, July 6th. It's a 6-game main slate now in total over on FanDuel. We did have the Toronto Blue Jays and Chicago White Sox game. Looked like it was initially going to be on the slate. Unfortunately, that game last night ultimately got rained out. So it's going to a doubleheader, so it is not on the slate. For most sites, I believe there's a couple out there that still may have it on there. I know FanDuel doesn't have it at all, and then DraftKings has it to where those players will not accrue points, so definitely be on the lookout for that. But in terms of what we'll be doing in today's video, going back to a more traditional recap of yesterday's picks, we're going to go over to the weather report for today's game, 6 games in total for the main slate. Go over to FanDuel, talk about the core picks that I do have for today, 1 pitcher and 4 hitters that do stand out for me today based on, past history plus recent history at the same time. And then last but not least, go over to the YouTube community tab, talk about the bottom half of my cheat sheet and the top GPP teams to stack today in general. That cheat sheet is 100% free. It's up on Facebook. It's up on Twitter. It's up on the YouTube community tab. So definitely be sure to check it out as you're building out your lineups today. If you're interested in more in-depth notes, be sure to check out the Patreon at patreon.com/Coach Craig Sports. A little bit of hitter versus pitcher matchups there, whether or not I would consider a pitcher in play and avoid or kind of a risky play just in general for today's slate overall. But without further ado, we'll get started with a recap of those picks from yesterday, which is the first time we're doing it all week since we had a lot of smaller slates earlier on in the week. So at the pitcher position, we had Justin Steele at $9,700. Got 28 points yesterday. Did give him a push, ultimately ended up probably being about like the 8th pitcher, middle of the pack there. Not anybody that really helped us, not anybody that really killed us at the same time. I had some pretty good history versus Milwaukee before that. 6 innings, 9 hits, 3 earned runs, and 5 strikeouts. So, if he doesn't give up quite as many hits, doesn't get quite up as many runs. If he gets the win, he's a guy that would have helped us yesterday overall. Then at first base, you could also play him at third base. We had Justin Turner at $3,300. Got to 16.2 points, so I did give him a hit yesterday. He ended up being the 5th overall first baseman, 5th overall third baseman yesterday, oddly enough. And then we get down to second baseman Nick Gonzalez, $2,000. Thought he was going to be a lot more popular yesterday. Ownership did not come in as much as I expected at that flat minimum of $2,000 price tag. Got to 6 points. This was kind of in between the push and the hit because he was the flat minimum price tag there, and the ownership wasn't really there. And then at third base, we went Manny Machado at $3,200, got to 34.7 points. He was a hit in the second overall third baseman, I think only behind Elly De La Cruz yesterday. And then last but not least, we have Max Kepler at $2,800. Ended up, unfortunately, getting 0 points. He was a miss. Coming off 4 straight back-to-back multi-hit games and 4 straight starts. But unfortunately, went 0 for 4 yesterday. Although it looked pretty good headed in today, just did not end up ultimately working out for him. So a little bit of hit or miss bags of tricks here yesterday for the core picks. But with that being said, we're going to stop sharing this screen. We'll get over to RotoWire, take a look at some of the weather reports for these games, at least early on for today. So let me get that pulled up as we're talking through it now. At this point in time, once again, 6-game main slate. Probably not too much weather-wise. Yankees and Baltimore game looks pretty solid with 7% chance of precipitation. Boston's at 8%, so that one looks pretty solid as well. Mainly this big one for today is going to be the Cleveland game versus Kansas City. 69% chance of rain at this point in time. So that will be one that we keep our eyes on throughout this day. And it's going to be a pretty important game too, because, the Guardians look like a pretty solid team to stack versus Jordan Lyles, who's been really rough to start the season. And then on the opposite end, we got Tanner Bybee. He's never faced the Royals before, but does look like a decent pitching option today. Houston, Seattle, and Dome, so we don't have to worry there. Chicago game is at 4% chance of precipitation, but like I said, not on the main slate at this point in time. And then we get down to, Diamondbacks in a dome, and then the Dodgers 0% chance of rain. So really only that Cleveland game that we're looking at in terms of weather for today. If anything does majorly change weather-wise, we'll try to leave that down in the comments below as the day moves along, as well as the additional starting lineups for each of these 6 games. So we're going to get moved over to FanDuel. Talk about the core picks that I do have at this point in time. So we are going to start off at the pitcher position. We got Nathan Eovaldi today, only $9,900, which is a little bit of a surprise here. Going against the Boston Red Sox, it's a fair matchup there. Did pitch for them in past seasons, so not quite a bit of history there, but the history today does have versus some of these hitters has been pretty decent, although it is very limited at this point in time. He's pitching extremely well this year, almost at 39 fantasy points per game. Less than $10,000 is going to look like a really, really solid play overall. If we click on him just a little bit here, see what he's done in totality for the season: 10 wins, 2.64 ERA, really, really looking good for him at this point in time. A couple down starts. not this most recent start, but the two before that. But, we still have that solid upside. The Red Sox, not the strongest strikeout matchup, but at the same time, should be pretty favorable there. If you like revenge narratives and all that type of stuff, you could go with that boat as well. But he's probably going to be a pretty popular option, especially since he is under $10,000 at this point in time. Then we're going to keep moving down. We got second baseman Gleyber Torres. He is going against the Baltimore Orioles today. It is Kyle Bradish on the mound, who is, an interesting young pitcher, a guy that I like quite a bit as a prospect. But in his career, Gleyber Torres is 3 for 4 versus him. So some pretty decent history there. Yankees are one of the teams that Bradish really hasn't done too well versus as of late. When you look at Gleyber Torres, it's been a lot of hit or miss as of late, but still has some pretty strong upside there. Fortunately, hit a home run back on the 4th of July. I think the 3rd of July is when we really liked him, when he had some pretty good history. But good to see him hit home runs once again, because it had been since June 18th since he hit a home run. So it's a pretty decent upside just to be had there today overall. $2,800, average 9.6 fantasy points per game, 245 average, 13 home runs, and 36 RBIs on the season. Obviously, the Yankees are going to be one of the teams that we do like stacking today. And at $2,800, not a bad price tag for the upside that Gleyber Torres can provide for our teams overall. Then at third base, got Jose Ramirez here. He is 4 for 7 versus Jordan Lyles in his career. Obviously, weather could play a major factor in this game, whether or not it ultimately ends up happening. $3,800, over 12 fantasy points per game on the season. 287 average, 13 home runs, 52 RBIs. So very involved in the RBIs once again. Kind of that main cog for that Cleveland Guardians offense. A little bit more hit or miss as of late. So a little bit downside there as opposed to some other games with Jose Ramirez. But we've also seen some very, very big and excellent performances for him this season, especially against pitchers that he has had good history versus in his career. Then we're ultimately getting down to the outfield. We got two guys in the same game. We got Harrison Bader and Anthony Santander. Harrison Bader, $3,200, averaging under 11 fantasy points per game on the season. We got 263 average, 7 home runs, 28 RBIs. Obviously spent some time dealing with some injuries this season. I believe 2 different injuries at that, or a retweak of the same injury. But since he's been with the Yankees going back to last year and this year, he's actually been a pretty solid player. We got a 2-game hitting streak for him going now, a modest 2-game hitting streak. We got 4 for 6 with 2 home runs in his career versus Kyle Bradish. One of those home runs coming earlier on this season. I believe he was 2 for 3 in that game as well. So some pretty decent history there versus Kyle Bradish. Like the upside that Harrison Bader can provide. If he's going out there and even if he's running just a little bit, maybe steals the base in this game, could help us out in that regard too as well. A very, very good, capable defender, a guy that has that potential to steal some bases, but had been dealing with a little bit of soft tissue injuries, at least early on in the year. So not running quite as much this season, if I do remember correctly. But then we get over to Anthony Santander in the opposite end of the matchup, $3,400, averaging 10.5 fantasy points per game, 266 average, 14 home runs, 47 RBIs. So pretty involved in driving and runs once again. He's been a pretty solid performer as of late. Obviously had kind of cooled off since his long home run stretch. There was about a week and a half span there where he hit 5 home runs in 6 games is what it ultimately ended up being. But since then, slowed down, cooled off a little bit, but has pretty good history in the past versus Luis Severino at 2 for 6 with 2 home runs versus him. One of the few Baltimore Orioles hitters that does have pretty good history versus him. Severino had a really, really rough start last time out. I've been a little bit rough so far this season. So we'll see how that ultimately shakes up, but definitely do like him today as well. And then with that being said, if you were to go with these 5 players, definitely don't have to play all 5 together. Obviously, understand that stacks do play a big part of the game, but if you use one of these guys as a one-off, in addition to some different stacks, definitely lots of ways that we can approach it on a 6-game main slate. A lot of ways to mix and match, which is something that I do recommend on these smaller slates. A little bit easier to take these ones down, but you still have a little bit bigger chance of being duped at the same time, or getting duplicate lineups and tying with somebody, if you're not familiar with that term. But with that being said, if you go with the 5 that I do have listed here, you'll have just under $12,000 at $11,900, just under $3,000 remaining per player. So probably a little bit more of a balanced build type of day, but there are some good values out there in terms of cheaper players if you want to pay up at the same time. Then with that being said, we're going to get off this screen. We'll go over to the YouTube community tab and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for today overall. So it's only a 6-game main slate. I only got 3 teams listed here. I will put a note out there too saying I think the Seattle Mariners are stackable depending on who ends up ultimately starting for the Houston Astros today. So last night looked like Ronel Blanco. There's different reports today where one says Spencer Watkins might start, one says Framber Valdez might start. If Valdez ends up being the starter, not too interested in Seattle today, although he has been dealing with an ankle injury, so his upside might be a little bit limited at that point in time. But if it ends up being Ronel Blanco or Spencer Watkins today, definitely have interest in stacking that Seattle Mariners team. Neither one has quite a long history versus them, but could be pretty interesting overall. So when I post up on Patreon, I will leave them in the notes. I'll try to make a comment down here on this video too, once we get the confirmed starter for the Houston Astros for today. But in terms of the other three teams that I do have to stack, we have the Cleveland Guardians, if the weather permits, going against Jordan Lyles, who has been really awful this year, 1-11. That ERA is up over 6, maybe even close to 7 at this point in time. Haven't really paid too much attention to him the last couple of weeks. It's just been a good matchup to go against all season. And then we have the Los Angeles Dodgers going against Johan Oviedo, who had a pretty good start to the season, but hasn't done too hot since then. Had one start versus this Dodgers team earlier this year. It did not go quite as planned, especially since he was pitching pretty well up to that point in time. So definitely do like going after the Dodgers today. Freddie Freeman's kind of the big one that has decent history versus him, but if you want to mix and match some other guys there, definitely makes some sense. James Outman's had two pretty strong back-to-back games. And then we got the Yankees going against Kyle Bradish. Like I said, a lot of these guys do have decent history versus him, whether it's Gleyber Torres, whether it's Harrison Bader, Giancarlo Stanton, you can even throw in that bucket. Kind of mix and match some different Yankees players there as well. But with that being said, that's really all that I have in terms of core picks, in terms of top GPP stacks, weather report, and recap for today for MLB DFS. If you have any additional questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments. Also, be sure to let me know your favorite play on today's slate, whether it's someone I mentioned in my core 5 picks, whether it's somebody from my top GPP stacks, or whether it's a completely different player you guys think I missed. Definitely interested in hearing what you have to say. With that being said, at the same time, we'll be dropping my MLB prop of the day on here as a pinned comment later on in the day. We'll also be up on my Twitter at Coach Craig Sport. So definitely be sure to check that one out. Also be sure to sign up for Prize Picks, Parlay Play, and Bet US if it's legal in your state using my promo codes found in the description below. We'll have them listed with the prop code or with the prop of the day, down is the pinned comment as well. Been pretty profitable, 6-3 since I started doing the official prop of the day. Yesterday we had the over on Cal Quantrell's hits over 6, ended up ultimately giving up 11 to that Atlanta Braves offense yesterday. So pretty profitable so far. So definitely be sure to check that out. Helps you guys out a little bit, helps me out as well. But with that being said, if you are brand new to my channel, checking out for the very first time and have yet to do so, and have yet to do so, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS right now. It's MLB DFS, got CFL DFS video that did go up yesterday afternoon as well. If that's something you're into, definitely be sure to check that out. Or even if it's something you want to try out for the very first time, some good information over there. Also have additional information for that over on my Patreon page at patreon.com/Coach Craig Sports. But with that being said, that's really all that I have at this point in time. And definitely do want to thank each and every one of you, whether you're watching live or on replay. Definitely means a lot to me. Hopefully each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS tonight.